Moving on to the Executive Director's report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I do have a PowerPoint for this item. I wanted to go over a couple of different things today. To start, and I did prepare a hard copy of this report, and it's posted online. You should have the report up there. And I'll go over it in some detail, and also the second part of it about the LCPs is rather lengthy, and so we are anticipating that if there's further discussion that you would like to have about it, that we can do that tomorrow as well and in future months. So, but we did want to get you that information soon. So the first thing in the report is simply an overview of the LCP situation in the Long Beach area, as we started to talk about last month. And so if you could bring up the slide, there's a overview of the map of the Long Beach area. The report summarizes that we have 8 LCP jurisdictions in LA County in the vicinity of Long Beach. The city of LA, of course, has 6 segments, including San Pedro immediately up coast. These segments are not certified. And the cities of Hermosa Beach and Torrance are also not certified. We do have some certified LCPs in the area, which include El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, Palos Verdes Estates, and Rancho Palos Verdes, and the city of Avalon out on Catalina. So a number of certified LCPs in the area. With respect to the city of Long Beach, which was certified in 1980, so one of the very earliest certifications, it is certified, but of course it hasn't been comprehensively updated, so it is a bit out of date. And currently the city is working on an LCP update for the Los Cerritos wetlands area and also the southeast area development and implementation project, also known as CDIP. So that's the status of Long Beach. And then we should also note, of course, that you learned, I believe last June when we took a field trip, that we have 2 ports in the area, both of which have port master plans, which, while not LCPs, are similar in intent in terms of providing the overall basis for managing coastal development in the ports. So that's the status of the Long Beach area LCPs. If you go to the next slide, please. The next slide is the beginning of a series of slides that I wanted to go through, which speak to a memo that's attached to the Executive Director's report about our LCP program. There is a lot of information in here, and of course didn't expect you to read it in the last 15 minutes when it was available, but there is some information that's important that we have out there, particularly as we prepare for legislative hearings on the Commission's budget that are coming up beginning next week. So again, we can talk about this information tomorrow again. If the Chair is amenable, we can trail any potential discussion of that if there is interest in that. And of course, we can talk about it in coming months. The report basically provides a background and overview of the LCP program, including the legislative framework and the implementation rules, but it also gives you a status report of LCP certification and amendment work that you do every month. And so this first slide simply shows you that in terms of LCP certification, we have 92 certified segments out of 128 segments that currently exist. So in this slide, what you see most prominently is that in the 1980s we did, and into the early 1990s, did most of our certification work. This is when we had a great deal of federal funding in the early years, as well as additional general fund for LCP planning work. So by roughly 1996, we'd certified a vast majority of the LCPs, and it's been a very incremental climb up the hill since then. Of course, trying to complete certification is one of our strategic plan objectives, one of our primary goals, and that's related to the funding augmentation that we received this last year. If you could go to the next slide, please. If you simply look at certification by various measures, you'll see that by segment we have about 72% of the segments certified. Next slide. If you go to looking at jurisdictions, we have a higher percentage, so only 15 jurisdictions are not certified in some respect, which is about 80% certification rate. Next slide. And if you look at actual geographic area, the acreage in the coastal zone that is potentially certified, we're up to about 83% certified. So depending on how you measure it, the certification rate varies between 72 70 and 80, upper 80%. Next slide. Another measure of the success of your LCP program that we've been talking about is the fact that the whole point of the LCP program is to delegate permitting authority back to local governments in areas that could be certified. And so this graph shows you the distribution of coastal development permits over time in the last decade or so. And what you can see, the blue is the Coastal Commission permitting, and the red is the local permitting that has been reported to us. And you can see that over time, local government permitting is more than half, and it's around 2/3 of the total permits that are being issued. So as a measure of the success of the LCP program, you see that most of the permitting is happening at the local level, which was the intent of the Coastal Act in the first place. There's always going to be some level of Coastal Commission permitting in our original jurisdiction, such as below mean high tide. Next slide. And the other reality of having an LCP program is that you're always hearing LCP amendments. So there's a constant need to keep LCPs up to date, respond to specific changes or local development needs. And this is a graph showing you the number of LCP amendments that you have processed, again, since about 2000. The average is about 50 a year. It's varied, ebbed and flowed a little bit. But you do have a constant, steady stream of LCP amendment work that you hear. Next slide. And this table is an updated table. I think we showed you a version of this table about 15 months ago in September or so of 2012. And this shows you the currently pending LCP amendments that we're aware of by district. And it's also broken down by the first two columns on the left are LCP amendments that are actually submitted to the Commission for review in two categories, filed and unfiled. So when an LCP amendment comes in, the first thing we have to do is review whether it has sufficient information, and then if it does, we file it. So you can see we have about 60 currently pending with the Commission itself. But if you look at the number of LCP amendments that are known to be pending out in the local world, there's over 100. So we're currently tracking and trying to engage with about 178 LCP amendments that are at some stage of the process. Quite a significant amount of LCP planning work. The next slide. And this slide is a slide I've been using over the years simply to explain the fact that we do need to maintain an active LCP planning program if we're going to continue to protect resources as well as respond to current development and economic needs at the local level. And this is just a list of some of the things that are constantly changing in the planning world and with respect to resources that need to be accounted for in LCP updates and amendments. So one of the most compelling changes that we've been talking about recently is climate change and sea level rise. And of course, most of our LCPs have not been updated to address that concern. And because of that, we're likely to not be as responsive and adaptive to those changes in things like coastal flooding, coastal erosion, and other trends related to climate change. But there are many other topics listed here that are constantly changing. So LCP planning is a dynamic process, and because of that, we need to maintain our investment in it. Next slide. So, and this is a slide that I've showed as well, and I think I presented to the Commission a couple years ago. One of our challenges over the years has been having the capacity at both the local level and the state level to do the necessary LCP planning to respond to the changing conditions. But LCP planning is complicated and has many actors that need to be involved, and there's lots of communication that has to happen if it's going to be effective. So if you can just go through the next couple of slides, please, that you'll begin to see the communication loops that we have to pay attention to. Keep going, there's more. Till everyone's connected. All right, so we have state and local officials and staff and the public, which includes many different stakeholders involved and interested in these planning issues. So it's a complex effort. And even at the local level, an update can take multiple years simply to move through the local process before it gets to the Commission. And one of the frustrations that folks have had over the years is the fact that we the Commission, and local governments have not always had the capacity to have a dialogue and necessary feedback loops while this planning is going on, and the process has become backloaded. What that has meant is that we've had more conflict at the back end and less LCP amendments or fewer LCP amendments ultimately adopted because of disagreements that weren't identified earlier. So the Commission has been engaging in the dialogue with local governments about how to improve that process and try to front load the process more. If you go to the next slide. And one of the things that came out of a couple of workshops that the Commission has held now since 2009, we did it in December 2009 and December 2012 with local governments, was to talk about LCP process and how it could be improved, including coming up with best practices about how to work early in the identification and scoping phase of an LCP amendment, drafting and adoption of the local LCP amendment, and then the submittal process to us and following that. But the emphasis has been to try to front load the process so that we can minimize conflict and reach agreement more easily at the back end of the process. Next slide. So this is a slide which shows that I think we are beginning to make progress given our emphasis in the strategic plan on the LCP amendment process, as well as looking at the resources that we've been able to get this last year through the augmentation. This graph begins back in September, I think it says there, about 15 months ago, which is when the Commission had a discussion about the time extensions of LCP amendments that we were dealing with, and the fact that we had to extend a lot of LCP amendments simply to be able to hear them in a timely way. What you can see here is the number of pending LCP amendments with the Commission trending down since that time, which is a direct function of our ability to staff the LCP program. The line at the bottom is the number of LCP actions you're processing each month. So and we've projected out what we think we might be able to do over the next 6 months, given the recent augmentation and the staffing that we were bringing on board. So I'm hopeful that the investment in the LCP planning process is actually showing results at this point, and that at some point, if we can sustain that funding, we would be able to bring the number of pending LCP amendments with the Commission down to the background level of the submittal rate, essentially, or near there. Next slide. The other thing that I'm happy to show is that we also see the processing time being reduced, at least based on the data we've been able to put together so far. And what you see here is the average number of days to do two things: the time between the submittal of an LCP amendment and when we file it, which is the bottom line, the green line. And then the upper line is the time between the filing of the LCP amendment and when you actually hear it. And what you see there, if you're wondering what that big bulge is, that's the peak of the furlough years. So you see a direct correlation between our ability to process LCP amendments and the staff capacity. In those years, that's when we had up to a 15% cut in staff due to furloughs. What you also see is in 2012 and 2013, that processing time coming down, precisely because we're being able to work more directly with local governments earlier in the process. So I think that's the last slide in this section. Next slide. Yeah. So that's a quick overview of some of the material that's in the report that we prepared for today. And I'm happy to talk about, maybe pause right now if there are any quick questions right now, but again, we can talk about it tomorrow once you've had a chance to look at it in more detail.